Anyways, we're here today, and thank you everybody for coming. Last day of the 10th Annual Fan Convention. I hope everybody's had a wonderful time. Today it's about college hockey. Got some great people here, and it says right here on the bio, you guys know this, there are many roads to a player can take in their development. Many Blackhawk players have chosen to hone their game in the NCAA. Our four guests today decided that that was the better route to maybe have an opportunity to play in the National Hockey League, and they're here. So we're going to start right off the bat. Oh, sorry. Over there at the table, if you would like to ask a question to any of the four gentlemen here today, run over there, throw a question in. About 10-15 minutes to go in the session. We'll grab those questions, and we'll get to all those questions for the players here this afternoon or this morning. So thank you very much. Our first guy, last year, 49 games, 6 goals. He's a local kid, went to Notre Dame. Vinnie Hinostroza. Is that song just etched in your head?
Yeah, it's a good one to hear walking up here, so.
That's nice. Notre Dame, not a bad school. This one is a good school. Born in Chicago, through Denver, resides out in Greenwich, Connecticut. Last year came to the Blackhawks after 4 years. At the Yale, John Hayden. There is not a better school than the University of North Dakota. I could be lying there a little bit, but former first-round draft pick from the University of North Dakota, Fighting Hawks. You know what I'm talking about. Nick Schmaltz. Love that song. The next guy was always one of my favorites, from the University of Wisconsin, Adam Burish.
That's a good song.
Before we get to any of the topics here this morning, we've got a little video. Take a peek at the video screens for a little bit on these four guys.
Looking for his first NHL point with a shot. He scores! Vinnie Hinostroza! Nick Schmaltz came out with a puck. Shoots and scores! His first National Hockey League goal! Here comes Taves. He's going to look for Hayden right to the goal. He shoots and scores! John Hayden in his second ever NHL game!
So the obvious first question that I'm going to throw at these guys is there is different ways to get to the National Hockey League. And when I came in the NHL years ago, back in the early 80s, it was Miracle on Ice that kind of set the tone for the collegiate players that got recognition, winning the gold medal in 1980. All of a sudden, people were turning their heads and say, where are these guys coming from? Who are these guys? And how did they just win the gold medal? Most of the players prior to that, not many Europeans in the picture back in those days, came from the Canadian Junior Leagues, which is still one of the major feeding systems to get to the National Hockey League. But it's become more and more common, and obviously I think that the education part of it is very important, that for players like myself, went to University of North Dakota. I left after 2 years, but I think the opportunity there is to have something to fall back on. If you don't play in the National Hockey League, you have that opportunity to get a greater education. So Vinnie, I'm going to throw this one at you first. You went to the University of Notre Dame. Why did you go to the University of Notre Dame?
I picked Notre Dame. I was 16 years old, and I was looking at a few schools, and Notre Dame's pretty much a Chicago school. It's pretty close, other than Wisconsin. It's one of the closest. So I visited there with my family, and just fell in love with the place. And it's obviously great education, and they made a great building for us. So it was a no-brainer for me to go there.
Vinnie, I know that you were recruited by a few other schools, and rumor was that Wisconsin was trying to get you there, but you didn't feel that that was the place for you.
Yeah, I actually canceled my visit to Wisconsin after Bird told me some stories.
Dummy.
No, I heard great stories about Wisconsin. I heard it's awesome, but after my visit, like I said, to Notre Dame, I just fell in love with it, and it was something I couldn't turn down.
John, you were born in Chicago. You went through Denver. You ended up in Greenwich, Connecticut, about an hour away from Yale. When you're living out there, was that your focus? Was that your dream to go play at Yale?
Yeah, it was. And at the time I committed, Yale was actually #1 in the country. So to get that type of education at such a first-class program with Keith Elaine, who's done a tremendous job developing players, was really a no-brainer for me.
Nick, University of North Dakota. Now here's a guy who was born in Madison, grew up around Wisconsin, around University of Wisconsin, but he went to the University of North Dakota, which is, if you follow college hockey, a big rival of the Badgers. There's a story behind it, which I didn't know until the Father's trip this year. Nick, talk a little bit about the story behind you going to the University of North Dakota and the history of your family.
Yeah, so my parents are both from Bismarck, North Dakota, and my parents moved to Madison when my mom went to med school at UW. So my dad and 2 uncles played football at North Dakota, so it was kind of a family tradition kind of thing. My brother was there. I wanted to play with him, so kind of made it easy for me, and kind of glad that I went there. I mean, Wisconsin's a great school, and I love being there in the summers, and they're turning their program around. But I think North Dakota was a good fit for me, and that's why I went there.
Always a dream. Adam's dream was to play at the University of Wisconsin. Talk about the decision, and it was a pretty easy one as far as I know.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know if Nick was good enough to go to Wisconsin, so. Yeah, for me growing up, I just wanted to play in college hockey, and you talk about the road to the NHL. That was never my goal. That was never my dream. It was to play at Wisconsin. I grew up in Madison. Every Friday, Saturday night with my mom and dad and my sister, we'd go to Badger games, probably like Nick too. And so that's what we did, and those were my idols. Those were the guys I had pictures of in my room and collected sticks and got autographs from the Wisconsin Badger players. And so as a kid growing up, it was always, you pick the number of your favorite Badger hockey player and you wear that on your team. And then as I got older and I go to junior hockey, it was just about getting to Wisconsin and trying to get a scholarship or get a chance to play for the Badgers one day. And I got there and I did that, and I was kind of living my dream. And really, I never thought of the NHL still while I was there. I just wanted to be the best I could there, and I wanted to win a national championship and do what I saw guys before me do and my heroes do. And then as I continued, my freshman year, I got drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, which was another goofy story because I didn't even watch the draft. I didn't know what was going on. I had no clue. I hung up on the Chicago Blackhawks scout that called me to say he drafted me. I hung up on him twice. I had a late night the night before, and I thought my buddies were messing with me, and so I just hung up on him. But then I went to Wisconsin. I had a great time, and then after I graduated college, and the Blackhawks invited me to training camp, and we ended up signing a contract. And again, I just felt it was borrowed time. I just was, this is cool. I'll try this Chicago Blackhawks thing. We'll see what happens, and I'm going to work really hard at it and give it a go. And I was fortunate, and I was lucky, and I worked really hard at it. And again, I think in the NHL, it's timing. A lot of it is where you are and timing. And if I was, where these guys are now, I would have no chance of playing in the NHL. I would have no chance of beating any one of these guys out for a spot. So for me, it was timing. I was here in Chicago when the team wasn't so good. There was about as many people in this room as at the United Center when I first started on the games. So it was timing for me. I was on a bad team at a good time for me, and so I made it. And I was fortunate that way. But for me, it was about playing for Wisconsin, and I just feel very fortunate to play 10 years in the NHL, and to be here for 4 years was my favorite 4 years, and I was lucky.
There's a major feeding system in the United States, and it's the USHL. Vinnie, you played in Waterloo for the Blackhawks there for 3 years. It was kind of nice that you're playing for the Blackhawks and now playing for the Blackhawks again. Talk about that path coming here through the Chicago system and then playing for Waterloo before you ended up going to Notre Dame.
Yeah, growing up in Chicago, high school hockey isn't where it should be right now. So I think we all played AAA, and when we were 16 years old, we all knew if we wanted to make it to college and make it to pro hockey, we had to leave home. So it's a big commitment from our family and ourselves, and I think Nick did it too. We left when we were 16 years old, and I went to Waterloo, Iowa, and it couldn't have been a better place. It's a great experience. I lived with the Billet family, and it's a great league. You see so many guys, pretty much every guy on every team is going to a college, so it's a great feeder program, and it's really pro-like, and you really learn how to be a pro and get prepared to go to college. So couldn't have been a better learning experience for me, and very thankful for my time I had in Waterloo.
Another way to get to the NHL, you've got the USHL, but it's also the National Team Development Program that a lot of the players have gone through. John, you were at Brunswick High School, and as a sophomore, I understand you committed to Yale, and it was a couple years prior to you going to Yale that you committed to Yale early on. You played 2 years with the National Development Program, the U17s and the U18s. Talk about choosing that route to get to the NHL, or to get to Yale, I should say.
Yeah, what's great about the USHL, the national team, and colleges, it's really about maturity development, not only on the ice, but as a person. So I think going to Ann Arbor at my sophomore year of high school, and then living with a host family, it really just developed me as a person, which was great. And obviously there's some players who don't go to college or leave after 1 year. Likely first rounders like Nicky here, but for me, I really needed the 4 years of development, and I guess it was really a 6-year process. It started in Ann Arbor, and at the national team, you play against colleges as a senior in high school, which was great for on-ice development, and you're traveling back and forth to Europe a few times a year to really line up against the rest of the best players at across the world in your age group. So I'm really grateful for my experience at the NTDP and then obviously at Yale. And I think, like I said, it's really about growing as a person.
Nick, you played in the USHL as well. Did you know that you and Adam played on the same team, the Green Bay Gamblers? Yep. You were there for a couple of years, I do believe, before you went to the University of North Dakota. Was that an easy decision to go down because it's not too far from home?
Yeah, it was perfect. A little over 2 hours from Madison, so I wasn't too far from home, and my parents could come and watch a lot of the games, and I could run home if I missed home or something like that. So yeah, it was a great spot. Lived with a great family like these guys did. So yeah, it was a great time. Thankful for it, and I loved it in Green Bay.
Adam, you're playing at the University of Wisconsin, and in kind of a unique situation, your sister Nikki also played at the University of Wisconsin, and a little bit of an earlier age, you and your sister played hockey together, and one of the things that I was looking at when I was checking out some of the things, you said she was tougher than some of the guys that you played with. True?
She would beat the crap out of Schmaltz in a second. I guarantee it. Like, not even close. Yeah, she was she was tougher than me growing up, and we were 1 year apart, so we played hockey together every other year. We were on the same teams in high school. She played with the boys on the boys varsity team, and then in college, I played a year of juniors in Green Bay, and so I went to college a year later, and she went to school on time because she was smart. And so then we were the same years all the way through school, and we lived in the same apartment buildings a lot of the same years, and I'd go to her games, and she would go to my games, and we ended up winning national championships the same year, and they won it the weekend before we did, and for me, after she won it, I think it was probably more fulfilling for me than for her. And even when I got to win one, I was still more excited and proud of her, and I guess what got me competitive, though, is when she won, we all went and met them out at the bar that night, and they had their trophy, and she wouldn't let me touch it, or she wouldn't let me go near her trophy, and said, "You got to go get your own next week, and if you want to try and touch one of these, good luck." And then I did, but yeah, it was pretty neat to grow up playing with my hockey. But just to go back to Nick for a second, so we grew up in the same town, and I actually worked for his dad when I was in end of high school and into college at a gym, and this little rat would be running around and shooting hockey balls all over the gym, and then after I'd get done working, then I'd go do his dad or his uncle would take me through a workout, and it'd be about once a week they'd make us puke on one of those skating treadmills. And this little rat's like shooting pucks and running around and getting in our way, and I'm trying to puke and I'm dying. He's laughing and thinking it's funny. So I've known Nick and his family for a long, long time.
Was he your mentor? Was he your idol growing up?
That would have been a bad idol.
Yeah, probably one of them. I mean, like you said, we skated on the hockey treadmill all the time. So, we've been knowing each other for a while, and I always used to watch him on the Badgers every weekend. So, yeah, I've loved watching him play, and he's definitely one of my idols.
Vinnie, University of North Dakota, or Notre Dame, sorry. UND, I kind of get them mixed up, and you can easily get those two schools mixed up. The history, the tradition of Notre Dame is something that's very special. Talk about how the feeling was being a part of that program, the Golden Dome, all the history that goes along with Notre Dame, being able to play there.
Yeah, I remember my first game. It's the first time wearing the crest on your chest, and you walk out into a rink, and for a lot of us guys, it's the first time you're wearing a crest on your chest that it's from a school you belong to. So it's really cool going out there and seeing all the students wearing the same shirt and same jerseys, and it's really special. And I think if you've ever been in Notre Dame, you walk around that campus, and it's just breathtaking how beautiful it is. There's so much history, so much tradition, and I think one of the coolest things is before the season starts, being able to go to the football games and really bonding with all the students. And it's really a family culture, and everyone really comes together for every sporting event, every activity. No matter what you're doing at that school, we're all part of the same family, so it's a really cool experience.
John, I know that this is kind of something that we've talked about and you've talked about in the past, but it's pretty cool, and I think it's pretty special that John was in a position to further his education, finish the degree, but also play here at the National Hockey League level when he came up with the Blackhawks last year. Now here's a guy that was finishing a couple classes when he was here with Chicago. He was writing an essay, and I think if I'm correct here, on terrorism, and you're also working on a paper of African archaeology. Pretty special. And then when the Blackhawks lost, you had an opportunity to go back and walk with your class. Talk about that whole experience coming here, but not quite finishing the school and being able to do that.
Yeah, it was a great experience coming here at the end of the season. I'm very grateful for that. So I intentionally front-loaded my schedule to have more classes in the fall because I anticipated signing with Chicago. So I only had 3 classes in the spring. And when I signed here, all of my professors were on board with me completing any assignments from the road. So I would do work a little bit on the plane. Or I remember in Nashville, Schmaltz was, I Skyped in for a presentation, and Schmaltz was in bed in the background.
Yeah, he was, I think it was, what language was it?
Indonesian.
Indonesian.
Yeah.
Speak some Indonesian for us. Give us something.
Tidak, which means no.
No, like a sentence. Like, give us like a sentence. Be like, it's really fun to be here today. Let us hear something.
Saya suka Chicago fans, which means I love the Chicago fans.
Wow,
which is great.
nice.
But yeah, it wasn't too bad, and I guess obviously it was tough losing against Nashville, but the silver lining was going back, especially for my family to be able to walk and get the diploma in person. And the Yale graduation ceremony was pretty special. It's a unique tradition. It almost feels like Hogwarts because it's such a rich history. But no, it wasn't too tough finishing school, and I'm just very grateful that I got the degree.
Political science degree?
Correct.
A minor?
No minors at Yale.
No minor?
I think they're worried that kids would just go too crazy and try and have 10 or 15 minors, so they shut that down pretty quickly.
There's a real cool story, and I think maybe you guys know about it, but I want John to touch on it as well. He was up on the podium for graduation. He accepted an award, special award, and Theo Epstein, who you guys know who he is, and a little bit of a different tradition at Yale that they don't wear the normal graduation hats. And while Theo was up there, you took the opportunity to steal his Cubs hat. Talk about that whole thing, because one of the things that he was talking about that he stressed in his commencement speech was to be bold. You took that opportunity to be bold, and you took his hat.
Yeah, obviously, it was great timing to have my first experience with Chicago, and then for Theo to be the commencement speaker. Obviously, it's such a great season for the Cubs, but yeah, there was that unique tradition of wearing your own hat instead of the traditional cap. And Theo was wearing his Cubs hat, and then switched to wear a Yale hat. And when I was up on stage, I took the opportunity. Like you said, the commencement message was really about being bold, and that was his advice for us. So I decided to take his hat. Took the Cubs hat, shook his hand, and let him know that he wasn't getting it back, and it was a fun experience.
He was pretty cool with it.
Yeah, he was awesome. I think all the students really took his messages to heart, and it's just great because it shows how relevant sports are today and how they can really bring communities together. And the Cubs and the Hawks have done that recently, and I think all the non-athlete students really could appreciate his messages.
Nick, you had an opportunity at the University of North Dakota to play with your brother Jordan, who's a couple years older than you. Also, he was drafted by the St. Louis Blues. You guys had an opportunity to play against one another in a preseason game last year. I believe you guys won the NCAA championships together. Was he gone the year before?
He left, yeah. He left a year.
So you got the championship when he left.
Yeah.
You're rubbing that in?
A little bit, yeah.
Talk about that opportunity to play with your brother at the University of North Dakota.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. Growing up, playing together in the basement or the backyard, whatever it was. We never played together on the same team, organized team. So when I had that opportunity to go to North Dakota with him, it was a no-brainer for me. So it was easy for my parents. They could finally go to one spot and see us both play. My grandparents were in Bismarck still, so they could come down to Grand Forks every weekend and watch us play. So it was really special, not only for us, but for the whole family.
Quick reminder that if anybody wants to ask these guys a question, head over there to my left, to your right, throw a question down on the sheet, and we'll get to those questions with about 10 to 15 minutes to go in the session. Adam, you had an opportunity to win, you won the NCAA in 2006. You played with some great players on that team that played great NHL careers. Some of them are still playing. I want you to touch on that in a second, but also I want you to understand that when Adam came to the NHL, there's always a role, there's a spot that you kind of are looking at on a roster. And I got to give Adam a ton of credit for what he did, because he kind of realized that he may not be the star player offensive numbers that he had growing up at the University of Wisconsin. There was maybe a role that he had to kind of change the way that he played in a little bit, have a little bit of a different mindset. Talk about, and you and I have talked about this before, you did what you needed to do to get to the National Hockey League. You weren't going to be denied after leaving in 2000, or when you left the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, you said that nicely. I sucked, so I wasn't going to score a lot of goals. That's really the truth. I wasn't like these guys. These guys were all really good players. They're studs, and these guys are going to play in the NHL for a long time and score a lot of goals for the Chicago Blackhawks. But for me coming in, I knew that I wasn't at these guys' level. I couldn't do what these guys could do, and I was going to figure out a different way to do it. And after about a week into my first training camp, you kind of find your way. You're looking at other guys, you're judging other guys, and seeing what these guys are doing, and then you get to preseason games, and you're kind of like, why isn't this guy doing this? And he's trying to take this guy's spot, or he's trying to be a scorer. Well, you look at the depth chart. I mean, you're not beating these guys ahead of you, and you're not taking Kane's spot. I'm sorry. Nobody's good enough, and so you just kind of measure yourself out. And for me, I just realized I had to try and outwork everyone, and that was all it was. And then that turned into, okay, now I got to block shots, now I got to kill penalties, because who really likes to get slap shots taken at you at 100 miles an hour, and because it sucks. And then it was, all right, and that was when there was a lot more fighting going on in the game too, and I was like, all right, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but I'm going to go and fight these mutants and get the crap beat out of me every night. And my teammates thought it was awesome. I mean, my mom and dad didn't think it was awesome, but my teammates thought it was awesome, because who wants to go and fight John Scott? Me. And so I just kind of found this little niche and this role on the team, and I just kind of kept doing it and had a little success at it, and I'd get more ice time the more shots I'd block and the more penalties I'd kill, and throw in a couple fights, or I guess fights is getting beat up a bunch of times, and that's kind of how I made it. And you just had to keep doing that and repeating it and showing up into training camp in great shape. That was something I had to really focus on. Is in Chicago, if you guys don't know, in training camp here, they do a physical fitness testing, and they put you through all these stupid tests that are really hard for a day. It's the first day of training camp, and they take it very seriously. And my first training camp, I don't think they knew who I was. I was a 9th round draft pick. They're like, get out of here, whatever your name is. And I showed up in great shape. I worked really hard at that, and then all of a sudden, that's how you get noticed. And to make the NHL, you have to get noticed. You've got to do something special or something different. You've got to be good at everything and great at a few things. And for me, that was one of them. To get noticed right away was just to show up in great shape and then go on the ice and outwork everyone. And again, it was timing for me. I was here when the team wasn't so good, and I was able to get my foot in the door that way.
I'll tell you what, you give him a lot of credit. Give him a round of applause, because that's not easy. It's not easy. When he came in here, he knew what he had to do to play in the National Hockey League. As he said, he knew what he had to do to play with the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was a little bit of a different role, but he was willing to do whatever it took, and he etched out a great NHL career. Vinnie, one of the things that people talk about when you make the next step from one level to the other is speed, and that's obviously something that you don't have an issue with. What was the major adjustment coming out of Notre Dame? You played some time in Rockford, National Hockey League. What's the biggest adjustment that you had to make, or still making, in making that step, that transition?
Yeah, I think my whole life I've been one of the faster kids. I think I picked that up playing football, but the biggest adjustment coming out of college, I think, was just the pace of the game. Not only are you skating fast, but the passes are faster, the plays are happening a second faster. You just have to get used to playing a little faster, and your brain has to get used to thinking a little faster.
John, how about you? You're a different type of player. You've got the size. You were talking about yesterday that one of the things that he's working on here in the offseason is the quickness to get to the NHL level that maybe you wanted to work on this summer. Talk about what adjustments you have to make coming out of Yale and now coming into the NHL.
Yeah, I'm the opposite of Vin. I'd love to steal some speed from him if that was possible. But I think as a bigger guy, you always have to work on your foot speed and quickness in tight areas. So for me, I think it's just about addressing the NHL and how the game's getting faster every year. The players are faster. And there's obviously such a tremendous skill level. Guys like Schmaltz on the ice, it's eye-opening. But yeah, speed, skill, things to work on every summer. And yeah, I think it's been set up here before. You got to show up to training camp in the best shape of your life.